he vanished after opening a letter from his dead brother. It was late October in the small town of Pine Hollow, Georgia. The air carried a chill that whispered through the pines surrounding Daniel Mercer's modest home. He had returned to this place after years abroad, seeking solace from memories he couldn't shake. But tonight, as the clock struck midnight, Daniel found himself sitting alone on his porch, staring at an envelope that seemed to defy logic. Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from, and what time is it there? The envelope lay unopened in his trembling hands. It was plain, almost ordinary, except for one glaring detail: his brother Mark's handwriting. Or at least, it looked like Mark's handwriting. Mark had been presumed dead for years now, lost during a fishing trip on Lake Superior. His body had never been recovered, leaving behind only questions and silence. Yet here was this letter addressed simply to Daniel, with no return address or explanation. For a moment, Daniel just stared at it, his mind racing. Should he open it? Was it some cruel prank? A mistake? No. The handwriting felt too familiar, too personal. Finally, curiosity won over caution. He tore open the envelope carefully, revealing a single sheet of paper inside. As he unfolded it, the faint scent of damp earth wafted up, making his stomach churn. Dear Daniel, if you're reading this, then I'm still alive. Or maybe I never really died. I don't know anymore. I remember the lake storm, the cold, and then waking up somewhere else, somewhere dark. There are things here, Daniel. Things that move in the shadows and whisper names. They know me. They knew me before I got here. Daniel paused, swallowing hard. His breath hitched as he continued reading. Time doesn't work the same way here. Days feel like centuries. Nights stretch endlessly. I've tried to find my way back, but every door leads deeper into this place. There's something calling me, pulling me further away from what's left of the world I once knew. His heart pounded as he read the next lines. I saw your face in a dream last night. You were looking for me. Don't do it, Daniel. Whatever you think you need to do, don't come looking for me. This isn't a place for the living. And if you ever get a letter like this one, burn it. By the time Daniel finished reading, sweat dripped down his forehead. The night around him seemed heavier, darker. The crickets had stopped chirping entirely, and the wind rustled the trees with an unsettling rhythm. He glanced toward the forest behind his house, its jagged silhouette looming against the moonlit sky. For a moment, he thought he saw a movementous shadow darting between the trunks, but when he squinted, there was nothing. He sat there for hours, replaying the words in his head. Was it real? Could Mark truly be alive? Or was this some elaborate hoax meant to torment him? By dawn, exhaustion forced him to retreat indoors. He locked the doors, drew the curtains, and tucked the letter under his mattress. Despite his fatigue, sleep eluded him. Every creak of the house made him jump. Every shadow cast by the fading sunlight sent shivers down his spine. That morning, Daniel decided to investigate further. He retrieved the letter and began writing a response. Questions poured out onto the page. Where was Mark? How could he contact him again? What did he mean about burning the letter? Before he could finish, however, another sound interrupted him. Knock, knock, knock. 3 sharp raps echoed through the house, coming from the attic. Daniel froze, his pen hovering above the paper. The attic hadn't been opened in years, not since their childhood. The ladder leading up was broken, and the hatch itself was sealed shut. Yet, there it was, again, another knock, louder this time. Summoning every ounce of courage, Daniel climbed the creaky stairs to the second floor. With each step, the knocking grew louder, more insistent. When he reached the ceiling panel, he hesitated. Then, without warning, the hatch swung open on its own. A gust of icy air rushed down, carrying with it the same earthy smell from the letter. "Hello?" Daniel called out, his voice barely audible. Silence. Then, a whisper, faint yet unmistakable. Daniel. His blood ran cold. That voice? It couldn't be. Not possible. "Mark?" he whispered, backing away. Another pause. Then, "It's too late." With those final words, the figure lunged forward. Daniel screamed, stumbling backward as the thing closed in. The last thing he remembered was the sensation of being pulled upward into the void beyond the attic. When the sun rose the next morning, Daniel Mercer was nowhere to be found. His truck sat abandoned in the driveway, keys still in the ignition. Inside the house, the letter remained untouched beneath the mattress, its contents unread by anyone else. Neighbors reported hearing strange noises during the night knocking, whispers, cries, but by daylight, everything appeared normal, or so they thought. Years later, hikers near Pine Hollow claimed to have seen a man wandering through the woods, muttering to himself. Some said he resembled Daniel Mercer, though older, frailer. Others swore he wasn't human at all, that his eyes glowed red in the dark and his skin bore unnatural markings as though carved by unseen hands. No one knows for certain what became of Daniel or whether his brother Mark truly existed beyond the grave. But one thing is certain, letters from the dead should never be opened lightly. Once the seal is broken, there's no turning back. And sometimes, the dead aren't the only ones watching. The fisherman who caught something that shouldn't exist. It was a crisp autumn morning in the small coastal town of Seabrook, Massachusetts. The air carried the scent of salt water and pine, mingling with the faint aroma of coffee wafting from the local diner. At precisely 6:47 a.m., as the sun began its slow ascent over the horizon, casting golden hues across the water, Thomas Grayson prepared his fishing gear at Dock 12. Thomas was no ordinary fisherman. A veteran of the United States Navy, he had spent 20 years navigating the world's oceans before settling down in this quiet New England town. His weathered hands moved methodically, checking each line and lure with the precision of someone who understood the importance of preparation. The dock creaked softly beneath his boots, echoing the rhythmic lapping of waves against the wooden pilings. This particular morning felt different, not because of any specific sign or omen, but rather an unspoken feeling that lingered in the stillness of the pre-dawn hours. The gulls were unusually quiet, their usual cacophony replaced by an almost reverent silence. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath as it whispered through the rigging of nearby boats. By 7:15 a.m., Thomas had cast his line into the water, letting it drift with the current just beyond the breakers. He settled onto his folding chair, thermos of black coffee in hand, watching the horizon where sea met sky. The water shimmered under the growing light, a living mirror reflecting the heavens above. It would be another hour before the tide turned, giving him plenty of time to simply exist in the moment. As the clock struck 8:30 a.m., Thomas noticed something unusual about his line. It wasn't the steady pull of a typical catch, but rather an erratic tugging that seemed almost deliberate. His experienced fingers tightened around the reel as the resistance grew stronger. This was no ordinary fish. The movement below the surface suggested something much larger than anything he'd encountered in these waters. The struggle continued for what felt like an eternity. Each pull on the line sent vibrations up his arms, carrying with them an energy that defied explanation. By now, other early risers along the dock had begun to notice the commotion. Some gathered at a respectful distance, whispering among themselves about the size of whatever creature Thomas was attempting to bring in. Finally, after what must have been 30 minutes of relentless effort, the first glimpse broke the surface. The crowd gasped collectively as they saw it not a fish, but something far more ancient and alien. Its form defied all known classifications, covered in scales that shifted colors like oil on water. Eyes glowed faintly, reflecting intelligence rather than instinct. Fins extended unnaturally, suggesting propulsion methods unknown to marine biology. Thomas's heart pounded in his chest as he fought to maintain control of the situation. His mind raced between disbelief and mounting terror as the creature slowly emerged from the depths. The weight of its body bent the rod dangerously close to breaking point, yet somehow he managed to guide it closer to the edge of the dock. At exactly 9:12 a.m., the full horror revealed itself. Standing there, surrounded by witnesses who could do nothing but stare in stunned silence, Thomas confronted something that should not exist in our modern world. The creature measured nearly 8 feet in length, its head resembling some grotesque amalgamation of shark and reptile. Gills pulsated rhythmically along its neck, while tentacle-like appendages writhed helplessly against the wooden planks. A collective murmur rose from the spectators as word spread quickly through the community. Local authorities arrived shortly after, led by Sheriff Mark Henderson, a man whose skepticism immediately gave way to genuine concern upon seeing the evidence before him. Conversations turned hushed, filled with questions none dared ask aloud. Where had this thing come from? How long had it been lurking beneath their waters? And most importantly, why now? Back at the Marine Research Facility located within Gloucester Harbor, Dr. Emily Carter examined the specimen with both professional curiosity and personal unease. Her team worked tirelessly to document every detail, taking measurements, photographs, and collecting samples for analysis. Yet, even she couldn't explain certain anomalies present in the creature's physiology structures that suggested adaptation to environments far removed from Earth's oceans. Meanwhile, back in Seabrook, tensions ran high among residents. Rumors spread faster than anyone could contain them, ranging from scientific theories to wild speculation involving government conspiracies and extraterrestrial origins. Nighttime brought little relief as people reported strange lights dancing across the water, accompanied by low-frequency sounds that resonated deep within their chests. One evening, approximately 3 days later, at 10:45 p.m., Thomas found himself drawn once again to Dock 12. Perhaps seeking answers, perhaps closure, he stood where everything had begun, staring out into darkness. The moon hung low, casting silver ripples across the restless sea. Then, without warning, the water erupted violently, mere feet away. What followed remains unexplained to this day. Witnesses described shapes moving beneath the surface, too large to be whales, too coordinated to be natural phenomena. Lights flashed underwater in patterns reminiscent of communication. And then came the sound a haunting melody carried on currents only those near the shore could hear clearly. Over subsequent weeks, life in Seabrook changed irrevocably. Fishing expeditions dwindled as tales of missing boats and strange disappearances spread. Tourists stayed away, sensing the unease permeating the once friendly town. Even the wildlife seemed affected, birds abandoning nests and seals avoiding familiar beaches. Yet amidst all this chaos, one constant remained the memory of that fateful morning when Thomas Grayson reeled in more than just a fish. Questions lingered unanswered, mysteries unsolved. But perhaps that's how it should be. After all, some things are better left undisturbed, hidden beneath the waves where they belong. And so, the story of the fisherman who caught something that shouldn't exist became legend among coastal communities, passed down through generations alongside warnings about venturing too far offshore during certain times of year. For though science may attempt explanations and skeptics dismiss accounts as mere folklore, those who witness the events firsthand know the truth that sometimes reality holds horrors beyond imagination. Pause here for reflection. In the end, perhaps it's not about understanding, but respecting boundaries we cannot see. The ocean keeps its secrets well, sharing glimpses only when it chooses. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. She watched her mirror move. Then it whispered her name. It was a quiet evening in late November when Emily Carter sat alone in her bedroom. The small apartment she rented in downtown Chicago felt colder than usual, even though the thermostat was set high. Outside, the rain tapped rhythmically against the window panes, creating an eerie soundtrack that seemed to match the heaviness in her chest. Emily had always been fascinated by mirrors. As a child, she would spend hours staring into their reflective surfaces, imagining what lay beyond the glass. Now, as an adult, this fascination hadn't faded, it had only grown stronger. Her bedroom mirror, a large antique piece with ornate gold framing, was her favorite. She'd bought it at a flea market months ago, drawn to its mysterious charm and intricate design. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. Restlessness plagued her. And so she decided to sit by her vanity table, brushing her hair while gazing absently into the mirror. The room was dimly lit by a single bedside lamp, casting long shadows across the walls. Everything seemed normal until something caught her eye. At first, Emily thought it was just her imagination. Maybe the wind outside had rattled the building slightly, causing the illusion of movement. But then she saw it again, a subtle shift, as if the mirror were breathing. It tilted ever so slightly, just enough for her to notice. Her breath hitched in her throat. "What? What is going on?" she whispered to herself, her voice trembling. She stood up slowly, approaching the mirror cautiously. The movement stopped as soon as she stepped closer, leaving her feeling both relieved and unnerved. Shrugging it off as fatigue playing tricks on her mind, she returned to her seat and resumed brushing her hair. But then, it happened again. This time, the mirror didn't just move, it distorted. The reflection rippled like water disturbed by a stone, warping Emily's image into something unrecognizable. Shadows stretched and twisted, forming shapes that shouldn't exist. Panic surged through her veins as she stumbled backward, knocking over the chair. "Stop it!" she shouted, though she wasn't sure who or what she was talking to. And then, the whisper came. Her name, Emily. It wasn't loud, but it sent shivers down her spine nonetheless. The voice sounded familiar, yet distant, as though carried by the wind from somewhere far away. She froze, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice barely above a whisper. There was no answer, only silence. The mirror remained still once more, its surface smooth and unblemished. For a moment, Emily convinced herself that she must have imagined the whole thing. Perhaps the stress of work or lack of sleep was getting to her. Determined to put the incident behind her, she turned off the light and climbed into bed. Sleep did not come easily that night. Every creak of the floorboards made her jump. Every draft of cold air sent chills down her spine. Just as she began to drift off, another sound woke her, the faintest scraping noise coming from her vanity. She opened her eyes to see the mirror swaying gently, despite the fact that there was no breeze in the room. The frame creaked softly as it rocked back and forth, as though alive. Emily sat up, her pulse quickening. "Stop," she said aloud, her voice firm but shaky. "Please, stop." The mirror ignored her plea. Instead, it tilted further, revealing a dark void behind the glass. Emily gasped, leaning forward to get a better look. What she saw made her blood run cold. A figure stood there, watching her. Its face was pale, almost translucent, with hollow eyes that glowed faintly in the darkness. Its lips curved into a smile that didn't reach its eyes, and its fingers curled around the edges of the mirror as though holding onto it for dear life. "You've seen too much," the figure rasped, its voice echoing eerily in the confined space. Emily scrambled backward, her legs tangling in the sheets as she tried to escape. The figure reached out, its hands slipping through the glass as though it weren't solid. Before she could react, it grabbed her wrist, pulling her toward the mirror. "No! Let go of me!" she screamed, struggling against its grip. But the harder she fought, the stronger its hold became. Slowly, inexorably, Emily found herself being dragged closer and closer to the glass. The world around her began to blur, replaced by an endless expanse of blackness dotted with floating lights. Just before she disappeared completely, she heard one final whisper. "Welcome home." By morning, Emily Carter was gone. Her neighbors reported hearing screams during the night, but when they went to check, her apartment was empty. The only thing left behind was the mirror, standing upright where she had last seen it, its surface now cracked and shattered. Some say the mirror still moves on certain nights, especially when the moon is full. Others claim to hear whispers emanating from it, calling out names of those who dare to look too closely. No one knows for sure what happened to Emily, but one thing is, certain mirrors are not always what they seem. A message in a bottle led to the most terrifying discovery. It was a quiet summer morning when Michael Reed found the bottle. He had spent the weekend camping near Lake Superior with his best friend, Jake Carter. The two men were avid hikers and outdoor enthusiasts, often venturing into remote areas for adventure. This time, they decided to explore the northern shores of the lake, where few tourists ventured due to its rugged terrain and unpredictable weather. The sun was just rising over the horizon, casting golden light across the calm waters of the lake. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful. As he walked along the rocky shoreline, something caught his eye: a small glass bottle half buried in the sand. Curiosity piqued, he bent down to pick it up. The bottle was old, its surface etched with faint scratches from years of being tossed by waves. Inside, there was a rolled-up piece of paper tied with a thin string. Michael untied the knot carefully, pulling out the fragile note. His heart raced as he unfolded it, revealing handwriting that seemed both familiar and strange. To whoever finds this, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. I don't know how much longer I can survive here, wherever here is. I woke up one day on an island in the middle of nowhere. No boat, no memory of how I got here, just endless water surrounding me and voices whispering my name every night. Michael paused, staring at the words. His hands trembled slightly as he continued reading. There's something here. Something watching me. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but now I see it moving in the shadows. It comes closer each night, calling out names. Names I recognize. People I knew before. But they're not alive anymore. By the time Michael finished reading, his stomach churned with unease. He glanced toward Jake, who was still setting up their tent nearby. Should he show him or keep it to himself? Before he could decide, another sound interrupted him. From the corner of his eye, Michael saw movement in the water. A dark shape surfaced briefly before disappearing again. His pulse quickened as he stared harder, trying to make sense of what he'd seen. Was it a fish? A log? Or something else entirely? That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. The wind picked up, rustling through the trees with an unsettling rhythm. Shadows stretched long across the campsite, making even the most mundane objects appear sinister. Jake noticed his friend's unease and asked about it. Something's wrong, Michael admitted, holding up the bottle. I found this today. Jake took the bottle, examining it closely. What is it? A message, Michael replied softly, and I think it might be real. He handed the note to Jake, watching as his friend's expression shifted from curiosity to concern. Neither spoke for several minutes after Jake finished reading. The silence between them felt heavier than usual. The next morning, they packed up their gear and headed back to civilization. Along the way, Michael couldn't help but notice strange occurrences, their compass spinning erratically, birds flying in unnatural patterns, and echoes of whispers carried by the wind. Each incident made his skin crawl, reinforcing the eerie sensation that something or someone was following them. When they finally returned to town, Michael went straight to the local library. He wanted answers. After hours of research, he discovered something disturbing. Stories of disappearances around Lake Superior dating back decades. People vanishing without a trace, leaving behind only cryptic messages or personal belongings washed ashore. One account stood out: a woman named Clara Thompson who claimed to have received a similar message in a bottle. She described waking nightmares of shadowy figures and voices calling her name. Her disappearance remains unsolved to this day. Weeks passed, but the mystery haunted Michael relentlessly. Every creak of his house at night sent shivers down his spine. Every shadow cast by moonlight seemed darker, more menacing. One stormy night, while sitting alone in his living room, he heard a soft knock at the window. Knock, knock, knock. Heart pounding, he approached cautiously. Outside, the rain poured heavily, obscuring everything beyond the glass. Yet, when he peered closer, he swore he saw a movementa figure standing in the darkness, its face pressed against the pane. Before he could react, the figure vanished. In its place, written in condensation on the window, were 3 chilling words. Open the door. Days turned into weeks, and the encounters grew more frequent. Whispers echoed through his house late at night. Shadows flitted across walls when no one was there. And always, always, that same phrase appeared wherever he looked. Open the door. Finally, driven mad by fear and exhaustion, Michael did exactly that. The moment he turned the lock, cold air rushed inside, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and salt water. Standing in the doorway wasn't human, not entirely. Its form shimmered like heat waves, shifting between shapes until settling on something vaguely humanoid. Eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, fixed intently on Michael. "You shouldn't have opened it," the creature rasped, its voice echoing unnaturally. "What? What are you?" Michael stammered, backing away. "That doesn't matter anymore," it replied. "You've already let us in." With those final words, the world around Michael dissolved into chaos. Shadows converged, swallowing everything in sight. Time lost meaning. Space warped unpredictably. All he could hear was laughter, cold, cruel, and endless. No one knows what became of Michael Reed. His house sits abandoned now, windows boarded up, grass growing wild in the yard. Some say they still hear knocking at night 3 sharp raps, followed by whispers too faint to understand. Others claim to see a man wandering aimlessly near Lake Superior, muttering to himself under the moonlight. Whatever the truth may be, one thing remains certain. Messages in bottles should never be ignored lightly. Once opened, there's no turning back. And sometimes, the things we unleash aren't the only ones watching. The man who made a deal with the devil and kept it. It was a cold December evening in the small town of Black Hollow, Pennsylvania. The snow had started falling earlier that day, blanketing everything in pristine white, but there was an unsettling stillness in the air that made even the bravest residents uneasy. This was the kind of quiet that whispered secrets from beyond the veil of reality. Ethan Grayson sat alone in his dimly lit study, staring at the flickering flames of the fireplace. He was a man in his mid-30s, with sharp features and eyes that carried the weight of too many sleepless nights. Ethan wasn't always like this. He used to be optimistic, hopeful, someone who believed in second chances, but life had a way of chipping away at people until all that remained were their darkest desires. Years ago, Ethan had lost everything. His wife, Clara, died in a car accident when she was only 28 years old. Their young daughter, Emily, followed shortly after, succumbing to a rare illness no doctor could explain. Grief consumed him, turning him into a shell of the man he once was. Desperation drove him to places most would never dare tread. That night, as the clock struck midnight, Ethan found himself standing in front of the ancient oak tree at the edge of town. The tree was said to have stood there for centuries, its twisted branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. Local legends spoke of it as a gateway place where deals could be made if one dared to ask. He didn't know what compelled him to go there, but something deep inside told him this was his last chance. As he approached the tree, the wind picked up, howling through the barren branches. Shadows danced across the snow, forming shapes that shouldn't exist. Ethan hesitated, his heart pounding in his chest. Then he spoke aloud, his voice trembling but resolute. "I'll do anything," he said, his words barely audible over the wind. "Anything to bring them back." For a moment, nothing happened. The world seemed frozen in time, the silence pressing down on him like a physical weight. Then, a low chuckle echoed around him, sending shivers down his spine. "You mean it?" came a voice, smooth and menacing, as if spoken directly into his mind. "Yes," Ethan replied without hesitation. "I mean it." "And what are you willing to give in return?" Ethan thought about it for a moment, though deep down he already knew the answer. "My soul," he whispered. The laughter grew louder, reverberating through the forest. "A fine bargain," the voice purred. "But remember, Ethan Grayson, once the deal is sealed, there's no turning back. When Ethan woke up the next morning, he was back in his bed, the events of the previous night feeling more like a dream than reality. At first, he convinced himself it must have been just a feverish nightmare brought on by grief and exhaustion. That illusion shattered when he walked into the kitchen and saw her. Clara stood by the stove, humming softly as she prepared breakfast. She looked exactly as he remembered, her beautiful, vibrant, alive. Tears filled Ethan's eyes as he approached her, hesitant to believe what he was seeing. "Clara?" he whispered. She turned around, smiling warmly. "Good morning, sweetheart. Did you sleep well?" Ethan couldn't find the words to respond. Instead, he pulled her into a tight embrace, holding her as if afraid she might disappear again. Later, when they sat down to eat, Emily came bounding into the room, laughing and chattering nonstop. Everything felt so real, so perfect, that Ethan almost forgot the price he'd paid. Almost. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan's life returned to normal, or at least as close to normal as it could ever be. Clara and Emily were back, filling the house with love and laughter. For the first time in years, Ethan felt whole again. Yet, despite the happiness surrounding him, a shadow lingered in the corners of his mind. Strange things began happening around the house. Doors creaked open on their own, whispers echoed through empty hallways, and every now and then, Ethan caught glimpses of figures lurking just out of sight. He tried to ignore them, telling himself it was just his imagination playing tricks on him. But deep down, he knew better. One night, while lying in bed beside Clara, Ethan heard Ita's soft knock at the window. Knock, knock, knock. His blood ran cold. Slowly, he got out of bed and approached the window, peering outside. The moonlight illuminated the yard, revealing nothing but snow-covered ground and the occasional pine tree. Just as he was about to turn away, movement caught his eye. Standing in the distance, beneath the ancient oak tree, was a figure cloaked in darkness. Its face was obscured, but Ethan could feel its gaze boring into him. The figure raised a hand, pointing toward the house. Then, it vanished. Ethan stumbled backward, his heart racing. He wanted to wake Clara, to tell her what he'd seen, but something stopped him. Fear? Guilt? Or perhaps both. Instead, he climbed back into bed, pulling the covers tightly around him. Sleep eluded him that night, each passing second stretching endlessly. Weeks passed, and the strange occurrences grew more frequent. Objects moved without explanation, voices whispered in languages Ethan didn't recognize, and the air in the house grew colder with each passing day. Despite this, Clara and Emily remained blissfully unaware, continuing their lives as if nothing unusual was happening. Then came the night that changed everything. Ethan was sitting in the living room, watching over his family as they played a board game together. It was a simple moment, yet it filled him with a profound sense of peace. Just as he leaned back in his chair, a sudden chill swept through the room. The temperature dropped dramatically, causing Clara and Emily to shiver. "What's wrong?" Clara asked, looking up at him with concern. "Nothing," Ethan lied, forcing a smile. "Just the draft." But it wasn't just the draft. The air crackled with energy, static electricity making the hair on Ethan's arms stand on end. Then, the lights began to flicker, plunging the room into darkness before snapping back on again. When the light returned, the figure from the oak tree stood in the doorway, its presence filling the room with dread. "Your time is up," it rasped, its voice echoing unnaturally. Ethan froze, unable to move or speak. Clara and Emily screamed, scrambling to hide behind him. The figure stepped closer, its form shifting between human and something far more monstrous. "You kept your end of the bargain," it continued, its red eyes glowing ominously. "Now it's time for me to keep mine." Before anyone could react, the figure lunged forward, grabbing Ethan by the throat. Pain, unlike anything he'd ever experienced, coursed through his body, every nerve ending, screaming in agony. He tried to fight back, to protect his family, but it was useless. The creature's grip tightened until the world around him faded into blackness. When Ethan woke up, he was no longer in his home. Instead, he found himself in a desolate wasteland, surrounded by endless fields of fire and ash. The sky above burned with an unnatural orange glow, casting long shadows across the barren landscape. In the distance, he could hear screams, agonizing cries of torment that chilled him to the bone. And then he saw them. Clara and Emily stood nearby, bound by chains of black smoke. They looked at him with pleading eyes, tears streaming down their faces. "No!" Ethan shouted, rushing toward them. "This wasn't supposed to happen." But the figure appeared once more, blocking his path. "You should have read the fine print," it sneered. "Souls aren't cheap, Ethan. You thought you could save them, but in doing so, you condemned us all." Tears streamed down Ethan's cheeks as he realized the truth. The deal hadn't brought his family back, it had trapped them in this hellish realm forever. Despair overwhelmed him, leaving him broken and defeated. No one knows what became of Ethan Grayson. His house sits abandoned now, windows boarded up, furniture covered in dust. Some say they still hear screams coming from within its walls, late at night agonized pleas for help that echo through the empty halls. Others claim to see a man wandering the streets of Black Hollow, searching desperately for answers. His face is pale, his eyes hollow, as if haunted by something unspeakable. When asked about his family, he simply shakes his head and walks away. Whatever the truth may be, one thing remains certain. Deals with the devil come at a cost. And sometimes, keeping your word isn't enough to undo the damage done. He uploaded a video saying he was being hunted, then he was gone. It was late at night in the small town of Willow Creek, Oregon. The streets were eerily quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves carried by the wind. Inside his modest apartment, Ryan Hayes sat hunched over his laptop, typing furiously into a YouTube video description box. His hands trembled slightly as he reread what he had written. "This isn't a prank, this isn't fake. I don't know how much longer I can survive this. Something or someone is hunting me. If you're watching this, then I'm probably already gone." Ryan hesitated before hitting publish. He glanced nervously around the dimly lit room, half expecting shadows to move where they shouldn't. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second stretching out like an eternity. Outside, the faint glow of streetlights cast long, distorted shadows across the walls. Why had he done it? Why had he uploaded that video? Deep down, Ryan knew it was desperation talking. Days earlier, everything had seemed normal. He was just another ordinary man, living an ordinary life, a graphic designer, working from home, spending most of his time behind a screen. But then, things began to change. It started with the noise of soft whispers coming from empty corners of the house, footsteps echoing through hallways when no one else was there. At first, Ryan dismissed them as tricks of the mind or old building creaks. However, as the days passed, the occurrences grew more frequent, more intense. Objects moved without explanation. Doors opened and closed on their own. And then came the worst part, the feeling of being watched, even when he was alone. One evening, while sitting in his living room, Ryan caught a glimpse of movement out of the corner of his eye. When he turned to investigate, nothing was there, or so he thought. That night, he couldn't sleep. Every sound made him jump. Every shadow seemed darker than usual. Finally, driven by fear and exhaustion, he decided to document what was happening. Maybe someone online could help him make sense of it all. The first video was simple enough, a shaky camera panning around his apartment, showing the places where strange things had occurred. He spoke softly but urgently, explaining everything he'd experienced so far. To his surprise, the video gained traction almost immediately. Hundreds, then thousands of viewers flooded his channel with comments and theories. Some suggested logical explanations, like stress or insomnia. Others warned him not to take the situation lightly. Encouraged, or perhaps terrified by the response, Ryan continued uploading videos. Each one revealed more details about his ordeal. In the third video, he showed footage captured by his phone's night vision mode, dark shapes moving in the background, just out of focus. By the fourth video, the comments section had exploded with speculation. People claimed to recognize patterns in the shadows, suggesting connections to urban legends or supernatural phenomena. But the fifth video would be different. It wasn't meant to entertain or inform, it was a cry for help. Ryan took a deep breath and adjusted the webcam mounted above his monitor. The light from the screen illuminated his pale face, highlighting the dark circles under his eyes. His voice cracked slightly as he began speaking. "I don't know why this is happening," he said slowly, choosing his words carefully. "I've tried ignoring it, blocking it out, pretending it doesn't exist, but it's getting worse. Whatever it is, it's closing in." He paused, glancing toward the door as if expecting something or someone to burst through at any moment. "I recorded some audio last night," he continued after a beat. "Listen for yourself." With trembling fingers, Ryan clicked play on a file saved on his desktop. Static filled the room, followed by low, guttural growls that sent shivers down his spine. Then came the whisper, a single word repeated over and over, barely audible but unmistakable. "Ryan." The sound cut off abruptly, leaving only silence. For several seconds, neither Ryan nor the camera moved. Finally, he cleared his throat and forced himself to speak again. "That's all I have for now," he said quietly. "If anyone knows what to do, how to stop this, please let me know, because I don't think I can keep running forever." Hours later, Ryan uploaded the video and stepped away from his computer, hoping against hope that someone might actually understand what he was going through. As he climbed into bed, he told himself it would be okay, that tomorrow, maybe, things would improve, but deep inside, he knew better. Sleep eluded him. Shadows danced across the ceiling, forming shapes that shifted and twisted unnaturally. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked twice, its cries fading into silence. Ryan pulled the blanket tighter around him, trying to ignore the creeping sensation that someone or something was standing just outside the bedroom door. The next morning, Ryan didn't wake up. His landlord found him hours later, alerted by the smell of burnt plastic wafting from beneath the apartment door. The scene inside was surreal. Every electronic device in the room, phones, laptops, TV had been destroyed. Their screens cracked and wires exposed. On the floor lay fragments of shattered glass and melted metal. In the center of the chaos stood Ryan's desk chair, tilted precariously backward as though abandoned mid-motion. There was no sign of Ryan himself. Word spread quickly through Willow Creek about the missing man who had documented his own disappearance. Investigators scoured the apartment, searching for clues. They discovered remnants of the videos still stored on Ryan's hard drive, along with fragments of text messages sent to friends and family in the days leading up to his vanishing. In one message, dated shortly before the final video was uploaded, Ryan wrote, "They're here. I can hear them breathing. Please tell someone, anyone." Another reads simply, "It knows my name." Despite extensive searches, no trace of Ryan Hayes was ever found. His case remains unsolved to this day, though many believe his videos hold the key to understanding what happened. Some say they still receive notifications when new content appears on his Channel 11, though the account has been inactive for years. And sometimes, late at night, people claim to hear whispers emanating from their speakers, calling out names they recognize. Names like Ryan's. The island where time stops at exactly 3:07 a.m. It was a quiet evening when Michael Hayes arrived at the small coastal town of Willow Creek, Oregon. He had spent weeks researching strange occurrences around Lake Superior for his freelance journalism Projecta documentary about unsolved mysteries in America. As he delved deeper into local legends, one particular tale stood out: the legend of Blackwater Island, where time supposedly stopped every night at exactly 3:07 a.m. Michael wasn't the kind of person who believed in supernatural phenomena outright. A man in his mid-30s with sharp features and piercing blue eyes, he prided himself on skepticism balanced by curiosity. But something about this story intrigued him. It wasn't just the eerie nature of the legend, it was the way locals avoided discussing it altogether. When pressed, they would change the subject or warn him not to investigate further. Ignoring their advice, Michael decided to visit Blackwater Island himself. Bajan one, Pendahuluan, Latar Belakang. Michael Hayes lived in a small town near Lake Superior. By day, he worked as a freelance journalist, writing articles about local history and folklore. By night, however, his passion lay elsewhere, exploring conspiracy theories and paranormal phenomena. This fascination stemmed from childhood memories of listening to ghost stories with his friends, though most dismissed it as mere entertainment. Lately, Michael had been feeling restless. His work consumed most of his time, leaving little room for hobbies or relaxation. On this particular weekend, he decided to dive deeper into his research, hoping to find a story worth telling. That's when he discovered Blackwater Islandan enigma wrapped in secrecy. As he delved further into the documents, Michael noticed patterns emerging. Names of missing individuals, dates of unexplained disappearances, and references to time anomalies scattered throughout the files. Some entries described eerie sighting shadowy figures moving where they shouldn't, lights flickering beneath the water's surface, and screams carried by the wind. Others hinted at experiments involving human subjects, though the details remained vague. Despite the warnings scribbled in margins, "Do not pursue, leave it alone," Michael felt compelled to investigate. Perhaps it was curiosity, or maybe it was destiny pulling him toward the truth. Bagian 2, Persiapan Perjalanan. For days, Michael prepared meticulously. He gathered supplies, food, water, flashlights, recording equipment, and studied maps of the lake. Locals warned him against venturing too far from shore, claiming the waters around the island were treacherous. Fishermen spoke of whirlpools that appeared out of nowhere, while hikers described thick fog that swallowed entire groups. One elderly woman named Mrs. Harper shared a chilling tale over coffee. "That island isn't natural," she whispered, glancing nervously around the cafe. "People go there, and they don't come back." Michael nodded politely but dismissed her words as superstition. Still, he couldn't ignore the unease growing inside him. What if the legends were true? What if the government really did cover up something unimaginable? Finally, the day arrived. With his boat loaded with supplies, Michael set sail under a cloudless sky. Birds sang softly overhead, and the sun cast golden light across the calm waters. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful. As he approached the island, however, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The air grew colder, and shadows stretched unnaturally across the waves. A thick fog rolled in, obscuring everything beyond a few feet. "I should turn back," Michael muttered to himself, gripping the wheel tightly, but it was too late. The fog enveloped him completely, and when it cleared, the island loomed ahead, a jagged mass of rock and trees shrouded in mystery. Bagian 3, Tiba di Pulau. Stepping onto the island, Michael immediately sensed something wrong. The ground beneath his boots felt spongy, almost alive. Strange noises echoed through the dense forest branches, snapping, whispers carried by the wind, and faint cries that sounded eerily human. Each step brought him closer to the heart of the island, where ruins of what appeared to be a laboratory stood half buried in vines and moss. Inside the ruins, Michael found remnants of experiments long abandoned. Test tubes filled with murky liquid-lined shelves, their contents glowing faintly in the dim light. Papers scattered across desks contained diagrams of creatures that defied logicybrids between humans and animals, beings with multiple eyes, and entities made entirely of shadow. At the center of the room lay a single objecta-black clock etched with symbols that pulsed faintly under his flashlight beam. "What is this?" Michael whispered, reaching out cautiously. Before he could touch it, the clock emitted a low hum, vibrating gently in his hand. Then, the lights in the lab flickered to life, illuminating the space with an unnatural glow. Michael froze, his mind racing. Was someone or something still here? Suddenly, voices filled the air, hundreds of them, overlapping and whispering unintelligible phrases. Michael covered his ears, trying to block out the cacophony, but the sound persisted. When he looked up, he saw movement in the corners of the room shadows, stretching and twisting into forms that shouldn't exist. "They know you're here," came a voice behind him. Michael spun around, flashlight trembling in his grip. Standing in the doorway wasn't Humanot entirely. Its form shimmered like heat waves, shifting between shapes until settling on something vaguely humanoid. Eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, fixed intently on Michael. "You shouldn't have come!" the creature rasped, its voice echoing unnaturally. "What happened here?" Michael stammered, backing away. "That doesn't matter anymore," it replied. "You've already seen too much." With those final words, the world around Michael dissolved into chaos. Shadows converged, swallowing everything in sight. Time lost meaning. Space warped unpredictably. All he could hear was laughter, cold, cruel, and endless. Strange things began happening almost immediately after the drawer incident. Pots and pans rattled in the kitchen cabinets, even though no wind blew through the apartment. Doors creaked open on their own, and the thermostat fluctuated wildly despite being set to a constant temperature. Shadows danced across walls where none should exist, forming shapes that shifted and twisted unnaturally. Michael tried to rationalize the occurrences, attributing them to old building creaks or overactive imagination, but deep down, he knew better. One stormy night, while lying in bed, he heard footsteps above his head, slow, deliberate steps that echoed through the ceiling. Though the apartment was on the top floor, the sound persisted, driving him to the brink of madness. Every night brought new terrors. Sometimes, he caught glimpses of himself in reflections where there shouldn't be any. Other times, he heard voices calling his name, though no one else was there. His mind raced with questions. Was he losing his grip on reality, or was something or someone watching him? Late one night, Michael stumbled upon a clearing where dozens of similar clocks sat scattered across the ground. Each one pulsed with the same eerie glow as the first. Driven to the brink of sanity, he hesitated. Should he open the box or leave it untouched? Deep down, he knew the answer, but curiosity won over caution. Taking a deep breath, he grasped the handle and pulled. The moment the lid slid open, Michael knew he'd made a mistake. A blinding light erupted from within, engulfing the clearing in radiant energy. Shadows danced across the ground, forming shapes that shifted and twisted unnaturally. Then, the whispers returned louder this time, clearer and infinitely more terrifying. "Michael, we've been waiting for you. You can't leave." Terrified, yet transfixed, Michael watched as the light coalesced into a towering figure. Its form shimmered like heat waves, constantly shifting between human-like features and abstract shapes. Eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, fixed intently on him. "You shouldn't have opened it," the creature rasped, its voice resonating unnaturally. "I didn't mean to," Michael stammered, stumbling backward. "That doesn't matter now," it replied. "You've awakened us, and we intend to stay." Panic surged through Michael as the creature advanced, its glowing red eyes piercing through the gloom. He tried to flee, but the forest around him warped and twisted, creating impossible paths and dead ends. Shadows converged, trapping him in a cocoon of darkness. Laughter echoed through the void, cold, cruel, and endless. No one knows what became of Michael Hayes. His boat was found adrift near the shores of Lake Superior, engines still running, supplies intact. Investigators scoured the area but found no trace of him. Inside the cabin where he stored his research, they discovered remnants of burned electronics and shattered glass. On the floor lay a single piece of paper, torn from one of the documents he'd carried with him. Written in shaky handwriting were 3 chilling words: "Time stops here." Some say the phenomenon still happens. Visitors to the lake report hearing faint murmurs carried by the wind, voices calling out names they recognize. Others claim to see a man wandering the shores, muttering to himself under the moonlight. Years later, rumors persist about Blackwater Island and its connection to other disappearances in the area. People report finding similar clocks in their homes, each displaying the exact same time, 3:07 a.m. Whether these stories are true or mere legend remains unclear, but one thing is certain: stepping foot on Blackwater Island comes at a cost, and sometimes keeping secrets isn't enough to undo the damage done. This town celebrates the day everyone goes missing. It was a quiet morning in the small town of Willow Hollow, nestled deep within the woods of Minnesota. The sun cast golden light through the towering pines, painting the streets with patches of warmth. To an outsider, it seemed like any other peaceful American town. But for those who lived there, this day carried a weight far heavier than its serene appearance suggested. The townsfolk called it Vanishing Day, a date etched into their calendars as both a curse and a celebration. Every year, without fail, the entire population of Willow Hollow disappeared at exactly midnight. Not a single soul remained behind, not even pets or livestock. And yet, come dawn, they would all reappear, seemingly unharmed but forever changed. No one knew why it happened. Some believed it was a curse placed upon the town by ancient spirits angered by human greed. Others whispered about government experiments gone wrong, leaving behind only fragmented memories and scars that refused to heal. Whatever the truth may be, the people of Willow Hollow had long since accepted their fate, marking Vanishing Day with solemn rituals and cautious optimism. That year, however, things were different. Emily Carter lived in a modest house on the outskirts of Willow Hollow. By day, she worked as a librarian, cataloging books, and helping residents find answers to life's questions. By night, however, her passion lay elsewhere, exploring conspiracy theories and paranormal phenomena. This fascination stemmed from childhood memories of listening to ghost stories with her friends, though most dismissed it as mere entertainment. Lately, Emily had been feeling restless. Her work consumed most of her time, leaving little room for hobbies or relaxation. On this particular weekend, she decided to dive deeper into her research, hoping to find a story worth telling. That's when she discovered the legend of Vanishing Dayan enigma wrapped in secrecy. According to the documents, the disappearances began decades ago, shortly after the construction of a mysterious government facility just outside the town limits. Official reports claimed the building housed scientific research labs, but locals swore it was something far more sinister, a place where time bent, space warped, and reality itself became fluid. Over the years, the facility fell silent, its existence erased from public records. Yet the disappearances continued, growing more frequent until finally settling on one specific night each year. Despite the warnings scribbled in margins, "Do not pursue, leave it alone," Emily felt compelled to investigate. Perhaps it was curiosity, or maybe it was destiny pulling her toward the truth. For weeks, Emily delved deeper into the town's history. She uncovered cryptic notes, photographs of empty streets taken during Vanishing Day, and reports marked as classified. The more she read, the colder the room felt. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the walls, and the faint scent of damp earth wafted up from the pages. One elderly man named Mr. Langley shared a chilling tale over coffee. "That facility isn't natural," he whispered, glancing nervously around the cafe. "People go there, and they don't come back." Emily nodded politely but dismissed his words as superstition. Still, she couldn't ignore the unease growing inside her. What if the legends were true? What if the government really did tamper with forces beyond comprehension? Finally, the day arrived. With her gear loaded, Emily set out into the night, determined to uncover the truth. As Vanishing Day approached, Emily prepared meticulously. She gathered supplies, notebooks, cameras, recording equipment, and studied maps of the town. Locals warned her against staying awake, claiming it was impossible to resist the pull of whatever waited for them in the void. Fishermen spoke of strange lights above the lake, while farmers described eerie silences that preceded the disappearances. One evening, while sitting alone in her living room, Emily heard footsteps above her head, slow, deliberate steps that echoed through the ceiling. Though her apartment was on the top floor, the sound persisted, driving her to the brink of madness. Every night brought new terrors. Sometimes, she caught glimpses of herself in reflections where there shouldn't be any. Other times, she heard voices calling her name, though no one else was there. Her mind raced with questions. Was she losing her grip on reality, or was something or someone watching her? Days before Vanishing Day, Emily noticed strange occurrences around the town. Clocks ticked backward, mirrors reflected images slightly different from reality, and sometimes she saw shadows moving where they shouldn't. Each incident reinforced the unsettling notion that the event was real and whatever awaited her was not good. Emily tried to rationalize the occurrences, attributing them to old building creaks or overactive imagination. But deep down, she knew better. One stormy night, while lying in bed, she heard whispers carried by the wind-soft murmurs that sounded eerily familiar. Names she recognized, yet couldn't place. The unease grew stronger with each passing hour. When Vanishing Day finally arrived, Emily prepared herself mentally and physically. She set up cameras throughout her house, hoping to capture evidence of what truly happened during those missing hours. Outside, the town gathered once more, lighting candles and singing songs passed down through generations. The air grew heavier with each passing second, as though the world itself held its breath. At precisely midnight, the lights flickered out. Emily's heart raced as darkness enveloped her home. Grabbing her flashlight, she moved cautiously through the rooms, checking each camera feed for signs of movement. For a while, nothing happened. Then, the whispers began. Faint at first, they grew louder and clearer with each step Emily took. Voices calling out names she recognized, yet couldn't place. Shadows danced along the walls, forming shapes that shifted and twisted unnaturally. Somewhere in the distance, a clock struck 13, a sound that froze her blood. "They're coming," came a whisper from behind. Emily spun around, flashlight trembling in her grip. Standing in the doorway wasn't Humanot entirely. Its form shimmered like heat waves, shifting between shapes until settling on something vaguely humanoid. Eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, fixed intently on her. "You shouldn't have stayed awake," the creature rasped, its voice echoing unnaturally. "What happens during those hours?" Emily stammered, backing away. "That doesn't matter anymore," it replied. "You've already seen too much." With those final words, the world around Emily dissolved into chaos. Shadows converged, swallowing everything in sight. Time lost meaning. Space warped unpredictably. All she could hear was laughter, cold, cruel, and endless. Desperate for answers, Emily screamed into the darkness. "Why does this happen?" "To ensure no one leaves," came the reply, its tone softer now, almost regretful. "This town, it wasn't always ours. We were brought here, experimented on, changed." Emily's stomach churned as she realized the implications. Whatever had been done here wasn't just science gone wrong, it was humanity tampering with forces beyond comprehension. The creature continued speaking, its words dripping with sorrow. "They thought they could control us. They were wrong. Now we ensure no one returns." Emily wanted to argue, to plead for her life. But doubt crept in, poisoning her thoughts. How could she fight something so powerful, so ancient? "Is there any way out?" she whispered, clutching the flashlight tightly. "There never was," the creature replied. "But thank you for setting us free." Driven to the brink of sanity, Emily hesitated. Should she run? Or stay and face whatever waited for her? Deep down, she knew the answer, but curiosity won over caution. Taking a deep breath, she stepped closer to the creature, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The moment she did, the world around her collapsed. Darkness swallowed everything in sight, erasing all traces of the town, the facility, and the creatures that lurked within. When dawn broke over Willow Hollow the next morning, Emily Carter was nowhere to be found. No one knows what became of Emily Carter. Her house sat abandoned now, windows boarded up, furniture covered in dust. Investigators scoured the area but found no trace of her. Inside the cabin where she stored her research, they discovered remnants of burned electronics and shattered glass. On the floor lay a single piece of paper torn from one of the documents she'd carried with her. Written in shaky handwriting were 3 chilling words: "We never return." Some say the phenomenon still happens. Visitors to Willow Hollow report hearing faint murmurs carried by the wind, voices calling out names they recognize. Others claim to see a woman wandering the woods, muttering to herself under the moonlight. Years later, rumors persist about Vanishing Day and its connection to other disappearances in the area. People report finding similar clocks in their homes, each striking 13 instead of 12. Whether these stories are true or mere legend remains unclear. But one thing is certain: celebrating Vanishing Day comes at a cost. And sometimes, keeping secrets isn't enough to undo the damage done. He dreamt of a woman who didn't exist until she knocked on his door. It was a quiet evening in late November when Daniel Mercer sat alone in his modest home in rural Georgia. The crickets were chirping softly outside, their rhythmic song blending with the faint hum of the old refrigerator in the kitchen. He had just returned from a long day at work as a graphic designer, feeling drained but content with the solitude that enveloped him every night. Daniel wasn't the type to dwell on dreams. To him, they were fleeting fragments of imagination, nothing more. But lately, something had changed. For weeks, he had been haunted by recurring visions of a woman, face so vivid it seemed real, though he knew deep down she couldn't possibly exist. Her eyes were piercingly blue, her hair flowed like midnight silk, and her voice carried an eerie calmness that sent shivers down his spine. In these dreams, she would stand silently in front of him, watching without speaking. Sometimes she reached out, brushing her fingers against his cheek before vanishing into thin air. Other times, she simply stared, her presence growing heavier with each passing second. Daniel tried to ignore the dreams, attributing them to stress or overwork. But the unease lingered, gnawing at the edges of his mind. Daniel Mercer lived in a small town near Lake Superior, Minnesota. By day, he worked as a freelance graphic designer, creating logos and advertisements for local businesses. By night, however, his mind wandered to darker places filled with shadows and whispers. This fascination stemmed from childhood memories of listening to ghost stories with his friends, though most dismissed it as mere entertainment. Lately, Daniel had been feeling restless. His work consumed most of his time, leaving little room for hobbies or relaxation. On this particular weekend, he decided to dive deeper into his research, hoping to find a story worth telling. That's when the dreams began an enigma wrapped in secrecy. At first, the dreams were vague. Shadows moving where they shouldn't, strange noises echoing through empty halls. But as days turned into weeks, the visions grew clearer. A woman appeared in his dream, her face so vivid it seemed real, though he knew deep down she couldn't possibly exist. Her eyes were piercingly blue, her hair flowed like midnight silk, and her voice carried an eerie calmness that sent shivers down his spine. In these dreams, she would stand silently in front of him, watching without speaking. Sometimes she reached out, brushing her fingers against his cheek before vanishing into thin air. Other times, she simply stared, her presence growing heavier with each passing second. Daniel tried to rationalize the dreams, attributing them to stress or overwork. But the unease lingered, gnawing at the edges of his mind. Despite his skepticism, Daniel felt compelled to investigate. Perhaps it was curiosity, or maybe it was destiny pulling him toward answers. For days, Daniel prepared meticulously. He gathered supplies, notebooks, cameras, recording equipment, and studied books about psychology and paranormal phenomena. Locals warned him against venturing too far into the unknown, claiming such investigations often led to trouble. Some spoke of cursed objects hidden in plain sight, while others described shadowy figures moving where they shouldn't. One elderly man named MrBallen shared a chilling tale over coffee. "Dreams like yours aren't normal," he whispered, glancing nervously around the cafe. "They're warnings. Something or someone's trying to reach you." "What happened here?" Daniel asked, leaning forward eagerly. MrBallen hesitated. "Back when I was young," he admitted finally, "we thought it was a curse. Something ancient, brought here by settlers who disturbed sacred ground. But then came the facility." His gaze drifted toward the window where shadows stretched unnaturally across the lawn. "And everything changed." These words weighed heavily on Daniel's mind as Vanishing Day approached. Was MrBallen exaggerating, or was there some truth to his warnings? Days passed, and Daniel noticed strange occurrences around him. Objects moved without explanation, clocks ticked backward, and mirrors reflected images, slightly different from reality. Each incident reinforced the unsettling notion that the dream was real and whatever awaited him was not good. When midnight struck, the lights in Daniel's house flickered out. He froze, gripping the edge of his chair tightly. Outside, the wind howled eerily through the trees, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and salt water. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the walls, forming shapes that shifted and twisted in ways that defied logic. Daniel tried to shake off the unease, convincing himself it was just his imagination playing tricks. But deep down, he knew better. One by one, strange occurrences began happening around him. Objects moved without explanation, clocks ticked backward, and mirrors reflected images slightly different from reality. Each incident reinforced the unsettling notion that the dream was real and whatever awaited him was not good. Then came the knock at the door. Knock, knock, knock. Heart pounding, Daniel approached cautiously. Through the peephole, he saw nothing but darkness. Yet, the knocking persisted, growing louder with each rap. Finally, driven mad by fear and exhaustion, Daniel did exactly what he had sworn not to do. He opened the door. Standing on the porch wasn't humanoid entirely. Her form shimmered like heat waves, shifting between shapes until settling on something vaguely humanoid. Eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, fixed intently on Daniel. "You shouldn't have opened it," the woman rasped, her voice echoing unnaturally. "Who are you?" Daniel stammered, backing away. "That doesn't matter anymore," she replied. "You've already let us in." With those final words, the world around Daniel dissolved into chaos. Shadows converged, swallowing everything in sight. Time lost meaning. Space warped unpredictably. All he could hear was laughter, cold, cruel, and endless. Strange things began happening almost immediately after the drawer incident. Pots and pans rattled in the kitchen cabinets, even though no wind blew through the house. Doors creaked open on their own, and the thermostat fluctuated wildly despite being set to a constant temperature. Shadows danced across walls where none should exist, forming shapes that shifted and twisted unnaturally. Daniel tried to rationalize the occurrences, attributing them to old building creaks or overactive imagination, but deep down, he knew better. One stormy night, while lying in bed, he heard footsteps above his head, slow, deliberate steps that echoed through the ceiling. Though the house was on the top floor, the sound persisted, driving him to the brink of madness. Every night brought new terrors. Sometimes, he caught glimpses of the woman in reflections where there shouldn't be any. Other times, he heard her voice calling his name, though no one else was there. His mind raced with questions. Was he losing his grip on reality? Or was something or someone watching him? Daniel's life became a blur of confusion and dread. He barely slept, constantly checking his surroundings for signs of movement. During the day, he visited the local library, searching for clues about the mysterious woman in his dreams. He discovered old newspaper clippings and folklore surrounding Willow Hollow, a town known for its unexplained disappearances. According to the documents, Willow Hollow had once been home to a government facility during the Cold War era. Official reports claimed the building housed scientific research labs. However, locals swore it was something far more sinister, a place where time bent, space warped, and reality itself became fluid. Over the years, the facility fell silent, its existence erased from public records. Yet, the disappearances continued, growing more frequent until finally settling on one specific night each year. Daniel realized that the woman in his dreams might be connected to this facility. Could she be a victim of the experiments? Or worse, a manifestation of whatever forces still lingered within the ruins? Determined to uncover the truth, Daniel spent hours poring over dusty archives in the library. Among the yellowed papers, he found a diary belonging to a former resident named Clara Thompson. Her entries detailed her experiences leading up to the disappearances. "I can feel it," Clara wrote in one entry. Something is watching me. It moves in the shadows, whispering names I recognize, names of people who used to live here. Another entry describes seeing strange lights above the lake. They come every night now, she wrote. Bright flashes that disappear as quickly as they appear. Is this our fate? To vanish into nothingness? These words haunted Daniel as he read them. Could the same forces responsible for Clara's disappearance still linger today, or was there something else at play? As Vanishing Day drew nearer, Daniel prepared himself mentally and physically. He set up cameras throughout his house, hoping to capture evidence of what truly happened during those missing hours. Outside, the town gathered once more, lighting candles and exchanging last words before the inevitable. When midnight struck, the lights in Daniel's house flickered out. Grabbing his flashlight, he moved cautiously through the rooms, checking each camera feed for signs of movement. For a while, nothing happened. Then, the whispers began. Faint at first, they grew louder and clearer with each step Daniel took. Voices calling out names he recognized, yet couldn't place. Shadows danced along the walls, forming shapes that shifted and twisted unnaturally. Somewhere in the distance, a clock struck 13, a sound that froze his blood. She's coming, came a whisper from behind. Daniel spun around, flashlight trembling in his grip. Standing in the doorway was the woman from his dreamsure face, obscured, but her posture unmistakable, hunched, skeletal, and broken. This isn't real, Daniel pleaded, tears streaming down his face. It's too late, the woman replied. Once you open your eyes, there's no turning back. Driven to the brink of sanity, Daniel hesitated. Should he run? Or stay and face whatever waited for him? Deep down, he knew the answer, but curiosity won over caution. Taking a deep breath, he stepped closer to the woman, flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. The moment he did, the world around him collapsed. Darkness swallowed everything in sight, erasing all traces of the house, the forest, and the creatures that lurked within. When dawn broke over Willow Hollow the next morning, Daniel Mercer was nowhere to be found. No one knows what became of Daniel Mercer. His house sits abandoned now, windows boarded up, furniture covered in dust. Some say they still hear knocking at night, 3 sharp raps, followed by whispers too faint to understand. Others claim to see a man wandering the woods, muttering to himself under the moonlight. Years later, rumors persist about the cursed house and its connection to other disappearances in the area. People report finding similar mirrors in their homes, each displaying reflections that don't quite match reality. Whether these stories are true or mere legend remains unclear. But one thing is certain, answering the door came at a cost. And sometimes, keeping secrets isn't enough to undo the damage done. The secret military base that erased an entire town. It was a quiet evening in the small town of Willow Hollow, nestled deep within the woods of Minnesota. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the streets. Ethan Hayes sat alone in his modest apartment, staring at the computer screen in front of him. He had spent weeks researching strange occurrences around Lake Superior for his freelance journalism project, a documentary about unsolved mysteries in America. Ethan Hayes lived in a small town near Lake Superior. By day, he worked as a freelance journalist, writing articles about local history and folklore. By night, however, his passion lay elsewhere, exploring conspiracy theories and paranormal phenomena. This fascination stemmed from childhood memories of listening to ghost stories with his friends, though most dismissed it as mere entertainment. Lately, Ethan had been feeling restless. His work consumed most of his time, leaving little room for hobbies or relaxation. On this particular weekend, he decided to dive deeper into his research, hoping to find a story worth telling. That's when he discovered the legend of Blackwater Basin enigma wrapped in secrecy. According to the documents, the U.S. government had once used a secluded area near Willow Hollow for experimental purposes during the Cold War era. Details were scarce, but there were hints of something far more sinister than mere military drills. People sent to the base never returned, not even scientists or soldiers. Those who tried to investigate disappeared without a trace. Any mention of the base was erased from official records, leaving behind only whispers and rumors. One elderly woman named Mrs. Harper shared a chilling tale over coffee. "That base isn't natural," she whispered, glancing nervously around the cafe. "People go there, and they don't come back." Ethan nodded politely but dismissed her words as superstition. Still, he couldn't ignore the unease growing inside him. What if the legends were true? What if the government really did cover up something unimaginable? Finally, the day arrived. With his gear loaded, Ethan set out into the night, determined to uncover the truth. For days, Ethan prepared meticulously. He gathered supplies, food, water, flashlights, recording equipment, and studied maps of the area. Locals warned him against venturing too far into the woods, claiming the path to Blackwater Base was treacherous. Hunters spoke of unnatural silences that fell over the forest, while hikers described thick fog that swallowed entire groups. Despite their warnings, Ethan felt compelled to investigate. Perhaps it was curiosity, or maybe it was destiny pulling him toward answers. Taking a deep breath, he stepped into the woods under a cloudless sky. Birds sang softly overhead, and the sun cast golden light through the towering pines. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful. As he approached the site of the base, however, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The air grew colder, and shadows stretched unnaturally across the ground. A thick fog rolled in, obscuring everything beyond a few feet. "I should turn back," Ethan muttered to himself, gripping the wheel tightly. But it was too late. The fog enveloped him completely, and when it cleared, the ruins of Blackwater Base loomed ahead, a jagged mass of concrete and steel shrouded in mystery. Stepping into the ruins, Ethan immediately sensed something wrong. The ground beneath his boots felt spongy, almost alive. Strange noises echoed through the dense forest branches, snapping, whispers carried by the wind, and faint cries that sounded eerily human. Each step brought him closer to the heart of the base, where remnants of experiments long abandoned stood half-buried in vines and moss. Inside the ruins, Ethan found remnants of what appeared to be a laboratory. Test tubes filled with murky liquid-lined shelves, their contents glowing faintly in the dim light. Papers scattered across desks contained diagrams of creatures that defied logistibrids between humans and animals, beings with multiple eyes, and entities made entirely of shadow. At the center of the room lay a single objecta-black clock, etched with symbols that pulsed faintly under his flashlight beam. "What is this?" Ethan whispered, reaching out cautiously. Before he could touch it, the clock emitted a low hum, vibrating gently in his hand. Then, the lights in the lab flickered to life, illuminating the space with an unnatural glow. Ethan froze, his mind racing. Was someone or something still here? Suddenly, voices filled the air, hundreds of them, overlapping and whispering unintelligible phrases. Ethan covered his ears, trying to block out the cacophony, but the sound persisted. When he looked up, he saw movement in the corners of the room shadows, stretching and twisting into forms that shouldn't exist. "They know you're here," came a voice behind him. Ethan spun around, flashlight trembling in his grip. Standing in the doorway wasn't Humanot entirely. Its form shimmered like heat waves, shifting between shapes until settling on something vaguely humanoid. Eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, fixed intently on Ethan. "You shouldn't have come," the creature rasped, its voice echoing unnaturally. "What happened here?" Ethan stammered, backing away. "That doesn't matter anymore," it replied. "You've already seen too much." With those final words, the world around Ethan dissolved into chaos. Shadows converged, swallowing everything in sight. Time lost meaning. Space warped unpredictably. All he could hear was laughter, cold, cruel, and endless. Strange things began happening almost immediately after the drawer incident. Pots and pans rattled in the kitchen cabinets, even though no wind blew through the house. Doors creaked open on their own, and the thermostat fluctuated wildly despite being set to a constant temperature. Shadows danced across walls where none should exist, forming shapes that shifted and twisted unnaturally. Ethan tried to rationalize the occurrences, attributing them to old building creaks or overactive imagination. But deep down, he knew better. One stormy night, while lying in bed, he heard footsteps above his head, slow, deliberate steps that echoed through the ceiling. Though the apartment was on the top floor, the sound persisted, driving him to the brink of madness. Every night brought new terrors. Sometimes he caught glimpses of himself in reflections where there shouldn't be any. Other times he heard voices calling his name, though no one else was there. His mind raced with questions. Was he losing his grip on reality, or was something or someone watching him? Days passed, and Ethan noticed patterns emerging. Names of missing individuals, dates of unexplained disappearances, and references to time anomalies scattered throughout the files. Some entries described eerie, sighting shadowy figures moving where they shouldn't, lights flickering beneath the water's surface, and screams carried by the wind. Others hinted at experiments involving human subjects, though the details remained vague. Despite the warnings scribbled in margins, "Do not pursue, leave it alone," Ethan felt compelled to investigate. Perhaps it was curiosity, or maybe it was destiny pulling him toward the truth. Late one night, Ethan stumbled upon a clearing where dozens of similar clocks sat scattered across the ground. Each one pulsed with the same eerie glow as the first. Driven to the brink of sanity, he hesitated. Should he look into the mirror or leave it untouched? Deep down, he knew the answer, but curiosity won over caution. Taking a deep breath, he stepped closer to the mirror, flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. The moment he did, the world around him collapsed. Darkness swallowed everything in sight, erasing all traces of the house, the forest, and the creatures that lurked within. When dawn broke over Willow Hollow the next morning, Ethan Hayes was nowhere to be found. No one knows what became of Ethan Hayes. His apartment sits abandoned now, windows boarded up, furniture covered in dust. Some say they still hear knocking at night, 3 sharp raps, followed by whispers too faint to understand. Others claim to see a man wandering the woods, muttering to himself under the moonlight. Years later, rumors persist about Blackwater Base and its connection to other disappearances in the area. People report finding similar mirrors in their homes, each displaying reflections that don't quite match reality. Whether these stories are true or mere legend remains unclear. But one thing is certain, stepping foot near Blackwater Base comes at a cost. And sometimes, keeping secrets isn't enough to undo the damage done. Ethan Hayes was a man in his mid-30s, living in a small town near Lake Superior. By day, he worked as a freelance journalist, writing articles about local history and folklore. By night, however, his mind wandered to darker places, unsolved mysteries, conspiracy theories, and the supernatural phenomena that fascinated so many others in the town. Recently, Ethan had become obsessed with uncovering hidden truths. His last article about government cover-ups had gained significant attention online, sparking interest among conspiracy enthusiasts. Encouraged by the response, Ethan decided to dig deeper. That's when he discovered the legend of Blackwater Bastion Enigma wrapped in secrecy. According to the documents, the U.S. government had once used a secluded area near Willow Hollow for experimental purposes during the Cold War era. Details were scarce, but there were hints of something far more sinister than mere military drills. People sent to the base never returned, not even scientists or soldiers. Those who tried to investigate disappeared without a trace. Any mention of the base was erased from official records, leaving behind only whispers and rumors. One evening, while sitting alone in his living room, Ethan heard a knock at the door. Knock, knock, knock. Heart pounding, he opened it to find Mrs. Harper, an elderly neighbor known for her knowledge of local legends. "You shouldn't do this," Mrs. Harper whispered, glancing nervously around the street. "Some secrets are better left buried." "I need answers," Ethan replied softly, closing the door behind her guest. "I can't keep pretending this isn't real." Mrs. Harper sighed, accepting a cup of tea Ethan offered. "Back when I was young," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "we thought it was a curse. something ancient brought here by settlers who disturbed sacred ground. But then came the facility, and everything changed. What happened there? Ethan asked, leaning forward eagerly. They experimented on us, Mrs. Harper admitted finally. On everyone? We didn't know it at the time, but now... Her gaze drifted toward the window, where shadows stretched unnaturally across the lawn. Now we're part of something bigger, something we can't escape. With those final words, Mrs. Harper stood and left, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts and his fears. For weeks, Ethan delved deeper into the town's archives, piecing together fragments of the past. He uncovered classified reports, handwritten journals, and photographs of empty streets taken during Vanishing Day. One document stood out, a diary belonging to a former resident named Clara Thompson. Clara's entries detailed her experiences leading up to the disappearances. At first, she described mundane details, family gatherings, school events, and daily routines. But as Vanishing Day drew nearer, her writing became increasingly erratic. I can feel it, Clara wrote in one entry. Something is watching me. It moves in the shadows, whispering names I recognize, names of people who used to live here. In another entry, Clara described seeing strange lights above the lake. They come every night now, she wrote. Bright flashes that disappear as quickly as they appear. Is this our fate? To vanish into nothingness? These words haunted Ethan as he read them. Could the same forces responsible for Clara's disappearance still linger today? Or was there something else at play? Days before Vanishing Day, Ethan reached out to other researchers online, sharing fragments of what he'd found and asking for advice. Most dismissed his claims outright, calling them hoaxes or fabrications. A few, however, offered theories ranging from alternate dimensions to alien intervention. Among those who responded was Dr. Marcus Langley, a retired scientist living on the East Coast. In their email exchanges, Marcus provided insights into similar cases he'd encountered during his career. There are places, Marcus wrote, where the rules of nature break down, where time bends, space warps, and reality itself becomes fluid. Though skeptical at first, Ethan began to trust Marcus's expertise. The older man encouraged him to proceed cautiously, warning of potential dangers. If you go, Marcus advised, take nothing unnecessary with you. Leave your phone behind if possible. Whatever happens there, it doesn't stay there. These words weighed heavily on Ethan's mind as Vanishing Day approached. Was Marcus exaggerating, or was there some truth to his warnings? When midnight struck, the lights in Willow Hollow flickered out. Ethan's heart raced as darkness enveloped the town. Grabbing his flashlight, he moved cautiously through the streets, checking each camera feed for signs of movement. For a while, nothing happened. Then, the whispers began. Faint at first, they grew louder and clearer with each step Ethan took. Voices calling out names he recognized, yet couldn't place. Shadows danced along the walls, forming shapes that shifted and twisted unnaturally. Somewhere in the distance, a clock struck 13, a sound that froze his blood. They're coming, came a whisper from behind. Ethan turned slowly, flashlight shaking in his grip. Standing before him was a figure cloaked in darkness. Its face was obscured, but its posture was unmistakable, hunched, skeletal, and broken. This isn't real, Ethan pleaded, tears streaming down his face. It's too late, the figure replied. Once you open your eyes, there's no turning back. Driven to the brink of sanity, Ethan hesitated. Should he run? Or stay and face whatever waited for him? Deep down, he knew the answer, but curiosity won over caution. Taking a deep breath, he stepped closer to the figure, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The moment he did, the world around him collapsed. Darkness swallowed everything in sight, erasing all traces of the town, the base, and the creatures that lurked within. When dawn broke over Willow Hollow the next morning, Ethan Hayes was nowhere to be found. Inside the void, Ethan encountered beings unlike anything he'd ever imagined. Their forms shimmered like heat waves, constantly shifting between human-like features and abstract shapes. Eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, fixed intently on him. "You shouldn't have opened your eyes," one of them rasped, its voice resonating unnaturally. "I needed to see," Ethan stammered, stumbling backward. "What really happens?" "That doesn't matter anymore," another replied. "You've awakened us, and we intend to stay." Panic surged through Ethan as the creatures advanced, their glowing red eyes piercing through the gloom. He tried to flee, but the forest around him warped and twisted, creating impossible paths and dead ends. Shadows converged, trapping him in a cocoon of darkness. Laughter echoed through the void, cold, cruel, and endless. No one knows what became of Ethan Hayes. His apartment sits abandoned now, windows boarded up, furniture covered in dust. Some say they still hear knocking at night, 3 sharp raps, followed by whispers too faint to understand. Others claim to see a man wandering the woods, searching desperately for answers. Years later, rumors persist about Blackwater Base and its connection to other disappearances in the area. People report finding similar clocks in their homes, each striking 13 instead of 12. Whether these stories are true or mere legend remains unclear. But one thing is certain. Stepping foot near Blackwater Base comes at a cost. And sometimes, keeping secrets isn't enough to undo the damage done. A voice came through static saying, "You're next." It was a quiet evening in the small town of Pine Hollow, nestled deep within the dense forests of upstate New York. The air carried an eerie chill that seemed to seep into every corner of the old wooden house where Emily Carter lived with her family. A single light bulb flickered above the kitchen table as she sat alone, scrolling through social media on her phone. Her parents were out for dinner at their favorite Italian restaurant, and her younger brother had gone to a friend's place for a sleepover. The room was silent, except for the occasional creaks of the old floorboards. Emily glanced at the clock hanging on the wall. It read 9:47 p.m. She sighed, feeling bored but comfortable in the solitude. Suddenly, her phone buzzed loudly against the wooden surface, startling her. It was a notification from a video call app she rarely used. Curious, Emily tapped the screen. "Who could this be?" she muttered under her breath, furrowing her brow. The caller ID showed an unknown number. Normally, she would have ignored it, but something about the timing felt strange. As if sensing hesitation, the device vibrated again impatiently. With a shrug, she answered. A crackling sound filled the speakers. Static. Nothing but static. "Hello?" Emily asked cautiously, leaning closer to the microphone. No response came, just the unsettling hiss of interference. She frowned, ready to end the call, when suddenly a faint voice broke through the noise. "You're next." Emily froze. Her heart skipped a beat before racing wildly inside her chest. The words echoed in her mind, sending shivers down her spine. Who said that? And what did they mean by next? Panic began to rise, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Who is this?" she demanded, her voice trembling slightly despite her effort to sound assertive. There was no answer, only more static. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the line went dead. Emily stared at her phone, breathing heavily. The screen displayed, "Call ended." She swallowed hard, trying to rationalize what had just happened. Maybe it was a prank call, or maybe there was some kind of glitch in the system. But deep down, a nagging feeling told her otherwise. To distract herself, Emily decided to check on the rest of the house. She stood up slowly, grabbing a flashlight from the drawer near the door. The hallway outside her kitchen stretched long and dark shadows dancing along the walls from the dim glow of her light. Each step echoed eerily throughout the empty home. Reaching the living room, she noticed something odd. The television was on, though she clearly remembered turning it off earlier. The screen displayed nothing but snow, accompanied by the same crackling sound she'd heard during the call. Confused, Emily approached the set and reached for the remote control. But before she could press any buttons, another message appeared across the screen in bold white letters. "You're next." This time, fear gripped her throat so tightly she couldn't scream. Tears welled up in her eyes as she stumbled backward, tripping over a rug and landing hard on the floor. Desperate to escape, she scrambled toward the front door, but as she twisted the doorknob, she realized it wouldn't budge. Someone or something was keeping her trapped inside. Panic consumed her now. Emily ran back through the house, searching desperately for another exit. The windows! Yes, the windows might offer a way out. Racing upstairs, she flung open one of the curtains overlooking the backyard. What she saw outside made her blood run cold. Standing beneath the pale moonlight was a figure cloaked entirely in black. Its face obscured by a hood, yet its presence radiated menace. For a moment, their gazes locked across the distance. Emily didn't know how or why, but she felt certain this entity was responsible for the call sand, whatever else was happening. Summoning all her courage, she grabbed the nearest object a heavy vase and hurled it at the window. Glass shattered everywhere as fresh air rushed in. Without thinking twice, she climbed onto the sill and leapt into the yard below. Pain shot through her legs upon impact, but adrenaline propelled her forward. She sprinted blindly through the forest surrounding her property. Branches whipped against her skin, twigs snagged at her clothes, but she didn't stop. Her lungs burned, her muscles screamed, yet still she pushed onward. Somewhere behind her, she thought she heard footsteps pounding after her. Faster and faster, she ran until finally collapsing near a clearing. Exhaustion claimed her briefly, allowing her mind to wander. Was this real? Could it possibly be true? Questions swirled endlessly without answers. When she mustered the strength to stand once more, daylight greeted her instead of night. How had hours passed unnoticed? More importantly, where was she now? In the distance loomed an abandoned asylum known locally as Blackwood Sanitarium. Its crumbling facade seemed to beckon her closer. Though terrified, Emily felt inexplicably drawn to investigate. Inside, the atmosphere grew heavier with each step taken deeper into its halls. Dusty floors groaned beneath her weight, while peeling wallpaper revealed ghostly shapes painted beneath. And then she found them. Photographs scattered carelessly across a desk in one of the rooms, images of people who bore striking resemblance to those around her hometown. People who had mysteriously vanished over the years. Among these pictures rested one final note written hastily in red ink. They've already chosen you. This video killed everyone who watched it, until now. It was a quiet evening in the small town of Maple Ridge, where fog often clung to the streets like an unwelcome visitor. The air carried a faint scent of damp leaves and wood smoke as Emily Carter sat cross-legged on her bed, scrolling through videos on her phone. It was 10:17 p.m., and the dim glow of her screen illuminated her face with a soft blue light. Outside, the wind howled softly, rattling the old wooden shutters of her bedroom window. Emily had been bored all day, stuck at home while her parents were out celebrating their anniversary and her younger brother Jacob was visiting friends for the weekend. She sighed, tapping aimlessly through social media when something caught her eye, a video titled, "This video killed everyone who watched it until now." Her fingers hesitated over the play button. A chill ran down her spine as she read the ominous caption beneath it. "Watch if you dare, but don't blame me if you regret it." Curiosity gnawed at her like a restless beast. What could this possibly mean? Was it just another internet prank? Or was there some truth behind those cryptic words? After a moment of hesitation, she pressed play. The video began with static nothing but black and white fuzz crackling across the screen. Emily frowned, leaning closer to her phone. Then, slowly, shapes began to emerge from the chaos. Faces, distorted faces, screaming silently into the void. Their mouths moved without sound, their eyes wide with terror. A sudden jolt of electricity surged through her body as one of the faces seemed to lock onto hers, staring directly into the camera. Or was it looking straight at her? Fear gripped her throat as the video cut abruptly to a dark room lit only by candlelight. In the center of the frame stood a shadowy figure cloaked in black, its face obscured by a hood. Its voice echoed hollowly through the speakers. "To watch is to die." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She dropped the phone as if it had burned her, scrambling backward until her back hit the wall. Her breathing quickened, her chest rising and falling rapidly as adrenaline coursed through her veins. This couldn't be real, could it? But deep down, she knew that something about this video felt different, more sinister than any other horror story she'd ever encountered. She glanced nervously at the clock. It now read 10:25 p.m. Just 8 minutes had passed since she started watching the video. Yet somehow, time felt stretched, distorted, as if reality itself had bent around her. Shaking off the unease, she grabbed her phone again and searched online for information about the mysterious clip. To her surprise, dozens of forum posts popped up, each detailing similar experiences. One user wrote, "I watched it last night. I woke up this morning fine, but my cat didn't. Found him dead in the corner of the living room." Another claimed, "Don't watch it unless you want to join them. They're waiting for you." Emily swallowed hard, her stomach churning as she scrolled further. Most of the comments ended abruptly, as though the users had simply stopped typing mid-sentence. Some accounts were even marked inactive shortly after posting. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. Her mind raced with questions. Who made this video? Why did it exist? And most importantly, what would happen to her now that she had seen it? Panic began to rise within her, but she forced herself to stay calm. Maybe it was all just coincidence, or perhaps someone was playing a cruel joke on the internet. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone anymore. Before the events of that fateful night, Emily had often heard stories about the strange occurrences in Maple Ridge from her grandmother. The town was rumored to have been built over ancient burial grounds, and many believed that supernatural forces lingered in the area. One particular legend spoke of a cursed videotape discovered decades ago in Blackwood Sanitarium, an experimental facility rumored to have conducted unethical experiments involving human psychology and paranormal phenomena. According to local lore, the sanitarium had once housed patients suffering from severe mental illnesses. Researchers there attempted to manipulate their subconscious minds using audio-visual stimuli, hoping to unlock hidden truths about the human psyche. However, these experiments went horribly wrong, resulting in numerous deaths among both patients and staff. The cursed videotape was said to be a byproduct of these failed experiments, imbued with malevolent energy that drove anyone who watched it to madness or worse. Despite the warnings, curiosity got the better of Emily. She decided to investigate further, starting with the oldest residents of Maple Ridge, who might remember the sanitarium's dark past. One elderly woman named Mrs. Thompson recounted tales of ghostly apparitions seen near the abandoned building, along with unexplained disappearances of people who ventured too close. Another man mentioned finding strange symbols carved into trees surrounding the property, which he believed were connected to rituals performed by the researchers. As Emily pieced together the fragments of history, she realized that the cursed video might not be just a modern urban legend. It could be a remnant of something far older and more dangerous. Emily was a typical teenager, balancing schoolwork, friendships, and family life. She excelled in photography, often capturing hauntingly beautiful images of the woods surrounding Maple Ridge. Little did she know that some of her photos contained subtle, anomaly shadowy figures lurking just out of sight that hinted at the darker forces at play. Her relationship with Jacob, her younger brother, added another layer to her character. Jacob was fascinated by urban legends and often regaled her with tales of haunted places around town. While Emily usually laughed off his stories, she couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt for ignoring his warnings now that she faced the consequences firsthand. At school, Emily kept the video a secret, fearing ridicule from her peers. However, strange things began happening around her. Classmates who had never spoken to her before suddenly avoided eye contact, whispering behind her back. Teachers reported seeing her name appear in strange contexts, such as graffiti scrawled on bathroom walls or cryptic messages left in library books. Even her best friend Megan seemed distant, claiming to have dreams about Emily being chased by a shadowy figure. These events left Emily feeling isolated and paranoid, unsure whom to trust. Yet, deep down, she knew she had to uncover the truth about the cursed video before it consumed her completely. Determined to uncover the truth behind the cursed video, Emily delved deeper into its origins. She visited the local library, where she uncovered dusty archives detailing the history of Blackwood Sanitarium. According to the records, the facility had conducted experiments on patients using audiovisual stimuli designed to tap into subconscious fears. One entry stood out: a report describing a prototype videotape created to induce extreme psychological distress. The experiment went horribly wrong, resulting in multiple deaths among test subjects. The tape was buried deep within the sanitarium's basement, presumed lost forever until now. Armed with this knowledge, Emily decided to visit the abandoned sanitarium herself. With trembling hands, she gathered supplies: a flashlight, a notebook, and a recording device to capture any evidence of paranormal activity. As she approached the crumbling building, an overwhelming sense of dread washed over her. The air grew colder, and the faint smell of decay filled her nostrils. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocating. Dusty floors groaned beneath her weight, and peeling wallpaper revealed ghostly shapes painted beneath. Each room told a story of despair-broken furniture, scattered medical equipment, and eerie drawings on the walls depicting scenes of torment. Emily documented everything meticulously, hoping to piece together the puzzle of the cursed video. In one particularly unsettling room, she found a collection of VHS tapes labeled with cryptic phrases like Experiment 13 and Final Recording. Among them was a tape marked with the same title as the cursed video she had watched. This video killed everyone who watched it until now. Heart pounding, she hesitated before inserting the tape into a nearby player. What unfolded on the screen was beyond comprehension: distorted images of screaming faces, whispers in an unknown language, and a shadowy figure moving unnaturally fast. At the end of the recording, a chilling message appeared: "You are next!" With no choice but to confront the entity responsible for the cursed video, Emily returned to the sanitarium later that night. Armed with courage and determination, she ventured deeper into the labyrinthine halls, following clues left behind by previous victims. Eventually, she came face to face with the shadowy figure from the video. Cloaked entirely in black, its presence radiated pure menace. Despite her fear, Emily refused to back down. Using her knowledge of the sanitarium's history and the cursed video's origins, she devised a plan to break the curse. Through sheer determination and quick thinking, Emily managed to reverse engineer the curse by recording herself confronting the entity. By exposing its origin and purpose, she broke the cycle of death, freeing both herself and countless others who had fallen victim to its power. Yet, as dawn broke and Emily emerged from the ruins of the sanitarium, she couldn't shake the feeling that something remained unfinished. That somewhere, in the depths of the forest, the cursed video still waited for its next victim. This expanded version adds layers of backstory, character development, and suspenseful twists to create a richer narrative experience. With careful pacing and emotional depth, the story becomes a gripping exploration of fear, curiosity, and survival.